What's going on, everyone? So remember when the San Antonio Spurs traded the 8th pick in Rob Dilingham to the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? To refresh your memory, in case you're somebody that forgot, the San Antonio Spurs traded Rob Dilingham, the 8th pick, to the Minnesota Timberwolves for a 2030 pick swap that is top 1 protected. So almost unprotected. As long as it doesn't fall in the first pick in the draft, then it can be utilized. So if it's the 2nd pick in the draft, the Spurs can swap it. And then an unprotected 2031 first. So they essentially got nearly 2 unprotected firsts in 2030 and 2031 for Rob Dilingham and the 8th pick. At the time, it was really questionable, right? Yes, they got Stephon Castle, right? And it was kind of like, okay, like, you got Rob Dilingham. He could make a lot of sense as a guard. And I mean, you could even have Dillingham and Castle together and kind of have them grow. And that could be your backcourt of the future. And then maybe you could trade Vassell, or you could have drafted somebody else. And then it was just kind of like, it was just odd, right? And even at the time leading in to the season and stuff, it was kind of like, okay, like odd trade, but okay, San Antonio, they have a plan. Right? Maybe they didn't think that Rob Dillingham and Castle made some sense, right? But it's like, okay, well, there were other guys that they maybe could have taken, but whatever. Nonetheless, right? Trust the process for the San Antonio Spurs. Well, that's looking like an absolute steal. So Minnesota ended up trading Karl Anthony Towns for Rudy Gobert, for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, right? And that in and of itself became incredibly questionable. And me, myself, did videos on here. I have a Lakers channel, I'm a big Laker guy. Even on the Lakers channel, I was like, I don't understand why they just did that. Like, that was like the worst decision they could have done. Minnesota's probably going to be pretty bad. And that was an understatement. Minnesota has been bad, but they are imploding. Anthony Edwards is not happy. Rudy Gobert, which is why I wanted to get to, I had him on my mind. Rudy Gobert trade was questionable to begin with. Now it's even more questionable without Karl Anthony Towns, because you neutralized all of the things that Anthony Edwards is best at, right? Like, you have zero floor spacing. Julius Randle isn't a great three-point shooter. Rudy Gobert, you don't even need to defend outside of 5 feet, right? Then you have Jaden McDaniels, who is a great defensive player, but three-point shooter is not great. Like, he can be inconsistent. He has his moments. Like, he's had seasons, but he's not looked at as a great three-point shooter, right? And then it's like, okay, Mike Conley, you basically have no shooting surrounding the guy who is probably the best rim pressure player in the league, and Anthony Edwards, and basically just neutralized him and turned him into a jump shooter and high volume three-point shooter. It made zero sense. And by 2030, 2031, Anthony Edwards might be gone. He might be out of there. Now, look, it's very possible that Minnesota kind of turns things around at some point. Do you trust him? Do you trust him, Connolly, and the Timberwolves to, like, figure stuff out? Because I don't. Like, they just continue to make poor decisions. I mean, the Rudy Gobert trade, right? I didn't really think, people looked at it last year and were like, oh, see, look, the trade ended up working out. I still don't think it was a great trade to make, right? I think you were better off, like, using those assets to go get, like, some real 3-and-D guys and just stay patient. Like, Minnesota was clearly heading down a positive path, and I just thought that they tried to expedite it, but they went the wrong route, and then they greatly overpaid for Rudy Gobert. They could have probably gotten 2 guys for that price, right? Like, and I just think that they were in better position to just be patient and just wait for the right move, wait for the right deal to come along. Even the Karl Anthony Towns trade didn't need to happen right now. There was no reason it had to happen this offseason. I understand that they wanted the flexibility and he was entering the first year of his contract and all that stuff. You could have waited, right? You were just in the conference finals. And then you went from the conference finals to just tearing the team down, tearing the team apart. And it's like, for what? Why? Right? Like, why not go into the season and see? If, like, you're bad and it was just kind of like a fluke year or something, then sure, at the trade deadline, trade Karl Anthony Towns. You probably would have gotten more for him at that point, because you probably would have teams like, like the Warriors probably would have been like, hey, we really need another star next to Steph. go get him. And you probably could have gotten a bunch of stuff that you could have kept to kind of build around Anthony Edwards, or you could have used as trade pieces to go and get other things or other stars or whatever. Maybe an upgraded version. Add the stuff you already have plus that stuff, and, maybe a Giannis becomes available or something, and now you have like 15 firsts and a bunch of players and all this stuff to go make moves and go make trades, right? And it's just like, I don't hate the trade for Minnesota for Rob Dilingham, right? And if Rob Dilingham becomes a star, right, then, or, even like all-star level, like, if he becomes like a real thing, him and Anthony Edwards could make a lot of sense as like this power duo. But it's the Spurs trusting that, like, and I don't know if they knew this or not, right? But like, it's almost like they knew, okay, this is a bad team that always makes bad decisions. So they're eventually going to make another bad decision. So let's just, Rob Dillingham, this 8th pick. We don't need a bunch of young guys, right? We're getting Chris Paul. We're doing all this stuff. Like, they had plans. They had a clear vision for this year. And they've been good this year, right? Like, they're not winning a championship or anything, but they've been good this year, right? So they're kind of just like, okay, let's just trust that the bad team that makes bad decisions is eventually going to make a bad decision and go and get 2 near unprotected firsts to... to power, and they have they have like a bunch of like first round. I mean, they have like Atlanta's pick. They have all kinds of stuff, right? Like, so the Spurs are in really great shape. They're gonna, I mean, that 2030, 2031 pick could end up being really good, even if it's not like, number 1, number 2 pick. Like, it could be like a top 5 pick, right? Like, and then they get both of them. Right, especially if the Spurs are good, because the idea by 2030, 2031, the Spurs should be good, right? Victor will have, 7 seasons under his belt or whatever it is at that point, right? Like, Stephon Castle should be coming into his own. Guys should be starting to come into their own, right? So the idea is like the Spurs are going to be really good by that time, 2030, and, in the next 5 years or whatever. And then a team like Minnesota probably loses Anthony Edwards, probably is bad, and they're not winning anything. They're probably tanking for the bottom, and now we're going to go and it's almost like the Timberwolves decided, you know what? We should rebuild. Right? Going and getting Dillingham. And then, like, you could have used that pick swap and that first to go get another piece. Or, again, to just be patient. You saw this, like, with Atlanta, too. Right? Atlanta was on the right course. They were heading in the right direction. They just got to the conference finals. And it was like Trey's, like, 2nd year or 3rd year or something like that. Right? Like, it was just like, man, you're clearly heading on the right path. Stay the course. And what do? They go and trade for DeJounte Murray. And it was just like, why? Like, even when like that trade happened, it was like, why did they just do that? Like, they didn't need another point guard. They needed, like, upgrades in the perimeter or another star to pair alongside Trey. And if they would have just stayed patient, they may have been able to work something out, pull something off. But again, it's just these teams. It shows like patience is important, right? Obviously, if something's there, take it. Obviously, if you're in a position to be aggressive, but also, understand your team and your roster and what you need. And it's just like Minnesota just didn't seem like a team that understood their roster and what they needed, right? Karl Anthony Towns, however you feel about Karl Anthony Towns, made the most sense alongside Anthony Edwards. Why? Because he is a big man that is one of, if not the best, big man shooters ever, right? The guy's ridiculous. The guy's like 40% on volume from 3-point range, right? Like, so now you have this duo, you have this tandem that can give you that offensive firepower. Go put the defensive pieces around him, right? Like, they should have been a team active in trying to get a Mikal Bridges. Instead of overpaying for, I know Mikal Bridges is having his struggles this year, but like, prior, right? Like, assuming he can get back to that. But like, like a guy like him, a legit 3-and-D guy that can go and, give you shots, could slot alongside guys, go get these legit two-way guys to pair alongside an Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. So you just have the defense, you have the pieces, and then you have your 2 stars that could just light it up. And then go get a serviceable shot-blocking big man. They didn't need a Rudy Gobert. Like, I understand that the previous year they were looking at, hey, rebounding and interior defense was an issue. Like, you could have solved that in a smaller meaning rather than just going extreme with the Rudy Gobert trade. It's just like, and especially overpaying for Rudy Gobert. It's just like, the decision makings aren't great. And you look at a team like the Spurs, who are just, they're a prestige organization. They're an organization that just has their stuff together. What do? No, hey, we're going to trust that this team is going to be a disaster in the next 5 years, and we're going to get some excellent draft picks. Now, again, if Rob Dillingham turns out to be a star or something like that, that could change things. But he's probably not going to get a real chance for the next few years, right? He's probably, like, unless they just, hey, let's hit the reset. But how long is Anthony Edwards going to wait around? How long? Like, so let's say you let Julius Randle walk and you kind of clear the deck a little bit here, and you got like Rob Dillingham. It's like, hey, this is the year we're going to let Rob Dillingham kind of see what he can be. And like, is Anthony Edwards going to be like, you know what? Like, let me ride it out for 3 years and see. Or at what point does he go, get me out of here, right? At what point is he like, dude, I want to win championships. I'm trying to be an all-time great. Not like, oh, maybe we'll win a championship or not. It's just, I think Minnesota is just a dumpster fire right now. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like and agree that, like, yeah, Spurs, they have won this trade so far. This is turning into a masterclass by the Spurs. Obviously, there's a lot of time before we actually see what the end result is, but I do think this is very interesting. But again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos. Truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.